I would record that for Jessica and company. All right, so Aristotle's three appeals: ethos, pathos, logos. How many people have heard of these things? So you've all heard of them, all right? So my job is done. Now there's a little more to it.
Is there anyone who hasn't been taught a lesson on this stuff yet? So you all have it? You all have been taught?
So, ethos, pathos, and logos, they're called Aristotle's three appeals. They are often put in this rhetorical triangle, and you can look at these Greek words. I say ethos, pathos, logos. The Greek would be ethos, pathos, logos, but we're speaking English here, ethos, pathos, logos. If you look at the English words, you can probably get some connection through etymology. So let's start with logos. What could that mean? Logic, okay? And it turns out it does mean logic. Like if I make a speech and it has some logic in it, that's the logos of the argument. But the Greek word logos also means other things, just like every English word means multiple things. What are some other things it might mean? Yes?
It's kind of similar to like logo, like a logo of a business or whatever.
Actually, that's probably one of the few things it doesn't mean. They were not communicating graphically in that way at this point, okay? But it would probably also mean, like if you have logic, you're probably using reason. So it means the capacity of reason that's in your head, as well as the reason I didn't have my homework because the dog ate it. So both of those things. It also means basically just word, right? So logos, singular, is word. It also means story. It also means speech. It also means narrative. It also means discourse. So basically, all of these things are logos. So when you talk about the logos of a speech or the logos of an essay, it is the logic that's in there, the reasons that are used, the words it's made out of, the line of its story, etc. So pretty much everything that is either from a word up to a deductive syllogism made out of words, it's all part of the logos. The facts are the logos, okay? Now, let's switch over here to ethos. Connecting to some English word, what does that mean? Where's it from? What's it connected to? Yes, Matt?
Ethics.
Ethics, absolutely. So, ethics comes from the same root as ethos. And so how would that connect to, let's say you've got a speaker up at a podium talking to some people. What is it? What could you say is the connection between this ethos and ethics?
What I learned in like junior high school was that it was like a credibility sort of
Absolutely.
thing.
Absolutely. Because if the speaker is credible, okay, I'm crossing credibility, don't cross the D's, credibility. If the speaker appears to be ethical, that would be one way you'd say they're credible, all right? So it's their credibility, it's their reputation. So you've got some piece of discourse, could be written, could be spoken. It has logos, the things that sort of made up the speech, and it has, this is the speaker.
It's a character, right? The character.
Character, all right? It's the character of the person. Now, it turns out that back in ancient Greece, it actually meant something else, but what we have in modern times, a lot of it comes from 18th century German and British philologists who made it be synonymous with character and ethics. And they were leaving out another big part that was there for the Greeks. So it turns out the word ethos comes from ethe, which means custom, habit, practice. So what is customary, what is habitual, what is regularly practiced is your ethe, and a very closely related word is ethnos. So what does ethnos sound like? What English word can you connect to ethnos?
Ethnic?
Ethnic, exactly. And ethnic doesn't necessarily mean that you're ethical or credible or the character. It's your tribal membership. okay? And to the ancient Greeks, ethos was not just, is the person credible, but to what tribe did they belong? So it turns out a speaker or a writer wants to present some discourse to an audience, and one of the first things they might want to do is communicate to the audience, I am a member of your tribe. And those would be called ethos moves, where they pick some words or they do a style of dress so that the audience now says, hey, you're one of us, we're going to listen to you. Because if you are perceived as not a member of the tribe, the audience could be going, oh, we're not listening to this cat, okay? So, ethos and ethics comes from ethnos, and at some level, when you think, well, what is ethical? What is ethical is what is customarily habitually practiced. So there are parts of the world where it is ethical for a man to have 5 wives, if he can support them. It's legal and it's ethical. And then we get into the difference between ethics and morals. Some people make morals be, this is rather larger and absolute, and ethical has usually time and space constraints. You've got the ethics of accounting, the ethics, etc. So we've covered logos, ethos, pathos. What's that about? Yes?
I believe it's emotion.
Yeah, emotion, all right? And what English words might you see that include something like pathos? Yes?
I always remember it with pathetic.
Pathetic, absolutely. Pathetic is good. Pathetic. Another?
Pathology.
Pathology, yep, that's going to be there too. Pathology. And what other ones? Put some prefixes on the front here.
Empathy.
Empathy, sympathy, right? So empathy and sympathy are both connected to this notion of pathos. And so it's the feeling in your heart. So we live at a time and place where there are people who would sort of criticize an author or a writer for having had too many appeals to emotion in their discourse. And what we got to do is we got to go with reason and logic, all right? But unless your audience is Commander Data and Mr. Spock, you're really missing out on opportunities to reach them if you're not willing to go for their heart. So
how does pathology fit there, though? I'm trying to
patior.
to suffer, undergo. Yeah.
It's all about suffering. The root word in this is both in Greek and in Latin, patior, pati, passus sum, passion. All that is suffer. So when you say, you've got sympathy, empathy, etc., it doesn't necessarily always have to be bad. You could make a pathos appeal to your patriotism, right? Anything that's going to get your heart moving can be a pathos appeal, but it comes from the notion of suffering.
It seems counterintuitive because you have like psychopath and sociopath, which are people who presumably don't feel empathy for others. Right?
Mhm.
So it's kind of counterintuitive.
It's possible that I'm wrong, that pathology and these other paths are not the same root, but I think they are, because I think it all comes back to suffering. All right?
It's homework for us now.
It is homework.
Aren't those like outdated terms though? Like psychopath and sociopath?
Not if you got one in your class, you're calling that all the time.
Well, I mean,
No.
I mean, they're
like,
no longer used in the psychiatric or psychological literature by professionals. Is that what you mean?
yeah, that's what.
That could be, but still, they still have meanings.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think sociopath is very much still used and becomes sort of like a legal
Yeah.
term, and it's like the people who just have got no compunction whatsoever about doing horrible stuff. They exist, those people exist, and what we got to do is try and make sure they don't get to interact with us.
It's an interesting question. I'll just add one thing. I think they probably are not used as labels the way they once were, but I think they're still used adjectively. It's like sociopathic behavior or psychopathic behavior. I think that is still accepted. I would speculate. Okay.
So these then are your Aristotle's three appeals, and you kind of all knew about them beforehand, but I hope I sort of expanded the notion of ethos a little bit over what you might have heard before. Now, any given piece of discourse can be analyzed using Aristotle's three appeals. So you look at a speech or an essay or a YouTube video, and you look at it and you say, okay, this seems to be attempting to appeal to the audience primarily through reason or primarily through emotion or primarily through the credibility and the character of the author. There are people who will do a really artful job of sort of name dropping, and as long as you don't perceive them as name dropping, then basically the ethos is good. It's sort of what happens is certain credibility accrues to them. The very best ethos move I ever witnessed personally was one where the papal astronomer was talking at another college. The Pope still has an astronomer, just as he had an astronomer back in the days of Galileo. They've got a nice observatory up on, I think, Castle Gandolfo, and they've got a guy who's a scientist. He's got probably a PhD in astronomy, and he looks into the heavens and, you know, tells the Pope and the other higher church hierarchy about stuff that he's seeing. And so he's giving a talk, and it's just about, you know, the size of the universe, et cetera, et cetera. And he says, the other day I was having coffee with the Pope, right? And it's like, that's the kind of thing. He's just kind of, he's dropping names, but it's like not too many people get to drop the name that they're having coffee with the Pope when something came up. So that was a really good, I found it a really good ethos move on his part. Now, if you didn't think much of the Pope, you might say, well, he just blew his credibility with me. All right. Any questions about Aristotle's Three Appeals? Because before we leave, you're going to be asked to do some homework. And the homework is to identify either a strategy or a figure, and there's a Canvas page that differentiates between the two, in Martin Luther King's letter from Birmingham jail. So one of the things is you can look at and you can find an ethos appeal or a pathos appeal or a logos appeal in it would be one way you could go. All right? Questions? All righty. Any questions, second one?
So the Canvas page, I think, distinguishes between trope and figure, is that right?
We talk a little bit about trope and figure, but again, I think we got to go. Okay, hold up the bottom book on the right-hand stack of books. Right-hand stack, right-hand
Oh,
stack.
this one.
There you go. So we have assigned to you a short book, Figures of Speech: 60 Ways to Turn a Phrase. This is the hand list of rhetorical terms, which has a couple hundred, and in here he has a lengthy piece on the ability or inability to differentiate between a trope and a figure. And he's got several hundred years of history explaining why it doesn't make sense, etc. So we will get to that.
No, I'm just saying, when you mention the Canvas page, I think the page actually refers to trope versus figure, not figure versus strategy, but we're not going to make a big deal out of
I
that.
think you're mistaken.
Really?
We can look at it in a minute. All right.
All right.
Now
Do we
it
do
turned
fisticuffs?
out.
No, but there might be a lot of money.
It turned out we all introduced each other because of the even number. I work with Matt. Dr. Ronnie, you didn't introduce yourself. Would you like to introduce
I
yourself?
require no introduction.
Okay, because it turns out most of you know her.
That was the best.
Most of you know her and she knows you. The only one I knew was Tara. I had Tara in a class 2 years ago, maybe, and it was called Education in the Arts. Was it terrible?
Oh, was that? That was good.
Okay.
That's a very dangerous question.
How was it?
All right. So, all right. So we've covered Aristotle's Three Appeals. We're going to come back to them because we're going to read the first 2 books of Aristotle's Rhetoric, where he covers the Three Appeals. But that's just your overview. I am now going to move on to a short history of Greek rhetoric. All right. Very short. Rhetoric has a history that's 2,500 years long. So I can't possibly cover 2,500 years. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going
You
to.
could if you talk very, very fast.
I am capable of talking quickly.
Listen, I fit a 20-minute presentation into 10.
Did you?
Yeah, it was
That's
cute.
good, that's good.
So, if I-
Like-
All right. So this is my brief history. So now I don't think we need to videotape anymore because this will be available to, was it Jessica?
Jessica.
Jessica. All right.